She didn't come home that night. Not a call, not a message, not even a small excuse to explain her absence. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest until breathing feels heavier than it should. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water that had long gone warm, checking my phone every 10 minutes like a fool who still believed in hope. Midnight bled into 2 into 4, and by then I wasn't pacing anymore. I was just sitting there, hollow, too numb to feel anger, too exhausted to keep making excuses for her. My mind kept trying to convince me of possibilities. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she stayed over at a friend's. Maybe she was caught up in something unexpected. But my body knew the truth. My stomach churned with a certainty I didn't want to admit. She hadn't been stuck. She had chosen not to come home. Looking back, the day had felt off from the very start. At breakfast, she was distracted, her eyes glued to her phone as her thumbs typed out messages with urgency. When I asked who she was talking to, she flashed me a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, just Kelly from work. That name had become her shield, her ready-made answer for every question I had. Kelly. Always Kelly. She left around 5:30 p.m. for what she called a team dinner, but her choice of outfit told another story. A blouse I'd never seen before, perfume she hadn't worn in over a year, and a look in her eyes that didn't belong to a wife saying goodbye to her husband. It belonged to someone already halfway out the door. I told her to be careful. She nodded absently, the way you might nod at a roommate or a neighbor, not the person you vowed forever to. And then she was gone. The hours that followed stretched unbearably. First, I waited with concern, then with suspicion. Finally, with a cold clarity I had been avoiding for months. At 2:15 a.m., I heard a car outside and my heart leapt, only to sink again when it drove past. The silence in the house was suffocating. I wandered into our bedroom and stood by her side of the bed, staring at the untouched pillow. The emptiness of that space was louder than any argument we had ever had. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just sat down, staring at the void where she should have been, and quietly accepted what I had been denying all along. I wasn't the man she wanted to come home to anymore. When the door finally opened at 3 a.m., I was still awake, still fully dressed, sitting on the couch. She walked in looking startled to see me there. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a little too messy, her voice unervingly casual as she said, "Morning, you're up early." I stared at her. She looked away. That told me more than any confession could. I didn't ask where she had been. I didn't beg for explanations. I didn't want another lie. Instead, I walked past her into our bedroom and pulled out a small duffel bag. Essentials only, clothes, charger, and the book I had been meaning to finish. At the desk, I scribbled a note on the back of a grocery list and left it on the counter by her keys. I'm leaving. Good luck with your team dinners. She didn't follow me when I walked out. Not then, not later, not the next day. That silence was its own answer. The first night away was brutal. I checked into a cheap motel a few towns over. Nothing special, just 4 walls, a bed that smelled faintly of detergent, and a bathroom that didn't remind me of her. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, waiting for a call, a text, something that would say I mattered enough to chase after. But my phone stayed silent. As painful as that silence was, it was also freeing, because silence is still an answer, and hers screamed louder than any apology ever could. By the second day, I turned my phone off. I didn't want empty apologies. I didn't want to wonder which would hurt worse, no message at all, or a half-hearted one. I took long walks through neighborhoods where no one knew me, where no one looked at me with pity. I bought a cheap journal and began writing down truths I'd buried for too long. Not just about her, but about me, about how I had been holding onto something that had been dying for years. This wasn't the first time she made me feel like an afterthought. It started small, canceled plans, distant conversations, work trips that didn't line up. I told myself she was stressed, tired, going through something. Maybe she was, but she never let me in. I had been loyal to someone who had already checked out long before she stayed out that night. I remembered one night, about 8 months earlier, when we lay in bed and she whispered, Do you ever wonder what life would be like if we'd never met? Asterisk at the time, I brushed it off as late-night musing. I told her I'd probably be lost without her. She didn't reply. She just turned over and went to sleep. That memory came back to me like a gut punch. Back then, it was a question. Now I realized it had been her quiet confession. On the third day, she finally reached out. Not with a call, not with a tearful voice begging me to come home. No, it was an email. Subject line: "Can we talk?" No warmth, no apology. Just asterisk, "I didn't think you'd actually leave. We need to discuss what happens next." Asterisk was cold, transactional. Like I was a roommate moving out early, not a husband walking away from years of shared life. She didn't mention love. She didn't say she missed me. Just logistics. And that told me everything I needed. A week later, I went back to the house to gather the rest of my things. She wasn't there, and I was glad. I didn't need a scene. I didn't want explanations. Walking through each room, I felt the memories sting one last time before I packed them away. Our wedding photos still sat on the shelf, frozen smiles mocking me with a happiness that no longer existed. Love isn't just about how it starts. It's about whether it lasts. Ours didn't. I found a note taped to the fridge, scrawled in her handwriting. Just 3 sentences. Asterisk, "I didn't think you'd really leave. I miss you. Can we start over?" Asterisk. I stared at it. Not because I was tempted, but because I finally saw the truth. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of herself she was when I loved her. She missed the comfort, the safety of knowing I'd always be there no matter how far she drifted. But love isn't about comfort. It's about respect. And the moment she laughed in my face by not coming home that night, respect died. I left a note on the fridge. Let her live with those words. Let her wonder why the door never opened again. That night, back at the motel, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Not because I was healed, not because the pain had vanished, but because I had made a choice that finally honored me. I chose myself. And there's a strange peace in pain when it's no longer tangled with confusion. I've learned something since then. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in small dismissals, the silences, the absence of care. It's in being made to feel like you don't matter until you finally start to believe it. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. I truly hope she finds what she was chasing that night. She didn't come home. But I won't be there to see it. Because when I wrote those words, asterisk, "I'm leaving. Good luck with your team dinners," asterisk, I meant them. Would you like me to polish this into a script style, like a story narration for your YouTube channel, so it flows naturally for listeners instead of just a written narrative?